Your concern has been that, and I think Jordan shares this, that so much of what is good in our Western developed societies is, at the very least, maintained by maintaining so-called Judeo-Christian values, or the remnants of our past religiosity, and that there is a baby in the bathwater that can be difficult to discern, and we can't empty the tub all at once, and this is very much because there's a zero-sum contest with the religious enthusiasm we see coming from the Muslim world. And of course, the Muslim world is all over the world at the moment. So in that contest between an older style of religiosity and theocracy, really, and modernity, you are not as eager as I have been to pull up Western religiosity by the roots.
Or chuck the vicars.
Yes.
Yes, I think that's fair. I think I sit metaphorically as well as literally between the two of you. I realized from our conversation in Dublin some of what your concerns are about what Jordan has been saying and what he is saying, and I share some of the concern. I said to you then that I used the analogy of what our friend Eric Weinstein recently described to me as Jesus smuggling. That it was a consequence of a discussion about biologists. What do you do if you're discussing design, intelligent design? You can be okay as long as your own bandwidth on the issue, as long as your own depth of knowledge on the issue is very considerable. You can be okay discussing that biology with somebody, even a fundamentalist Christian, so long as you can follow every step of the way. But the fear will always be that the moment you're not looking, they're going to smuggle Jesus in. Or they'll wait till the moment that you're not comfortable anymore with the argument, the bit when you're at the very end of your cognitive ability, and then they'll, trust me.
There's Jesus. Yes.
There's Jesus. Yeah. And one of the things I realized from Dublin was, although I think you may not think that Jordan himself is going to try Jesus smuggling on you, you fear that somewhere down the line from what he's saying, somebody else will do that trick.
Yeah, it's worse than that. I actually know the people who are clapping are doing that. I hear from those people on a daily basis, right? So that the segment of Jordan's audience that is very happy to be told they can stay on the riverbank of their traditional Christianity for the most part, and they don't have to get into the stream of totally modern, rigorous, rational thinking about everything from first principles. Right, that there's something that the Iron Age scribes got right, and it's right for all time. Those are the applause I'm hearing. And however consciously or not, Jordan is telling them it's okay to stick right there with a shard of the cross.
Okay, well, in Dublin, I actually tried a little conscious Jesus smuggling on Sam to see how that would go in a discussion we had about the central archetype of superheroes, but I'm going to try something a little different tonight. I'm going to try a little direct God smuggling. We won't bother with Jesus. Let's go right to God. Why not? So one of the things I've really tried to do when I've been analyzing religious texts is to take them seriously in the sense that I don't presume that I understand them, and I presume that they're a mystery of sorts, and at least the Bible, for example, is a mystery because we don't really understand the processes by which it was constructed, and we don't understand the processes by which we all agreed collectively over several thousand years to organize the book the way it is organized, or to edit it the way that it's edited, and to keep what's in it and to discard what's not in it, and why it's lasted and why it's had such a huge impact.
I don't want to derail you, but yeah. We do understand the first part of the process all too well. We know that there was a political and all too human process of voting certain texts in for inclusion, and some were in for centuries and then got jettisoned, and Revelation came in far later than. I mean, there were whole generations of Christians
Mm-hmm.
who lived and died under the banner of the Bible,
Yes.
and it was a different Bible at the time.
Of
They
course,
had the wrong
of
Bible.
course.
So
well, but it's the same. It's the same issue that we really don't understand. Fair enough, Sam. And I'm not saying that political, etc., considerations didn't enter into it. I'm sure all human considerations entered into it, but there was some collective process of winnowing, and you can attempt to reduce that to economic or political causes, which is generally what secular assessors like Freud and Marx both did, and with a fair degree of success, I might add. But there's still some mysterious assessment of what it is that will be remembered that entered into it. But it's a separate point to some degree. But I'm just saying that my point of departure when looking at these texts is one of an essential radical ignorance. I don't assume that I understand the mechanisms by which they were generated or edited or collected or kept or remembered, or why they had the impact they had. Now, I've been thinking a lot about the idea of, let's say, God the Father, because that's a very common archetypal representation of God the Father. So I'm going to tell you an experience that I had that I've never really told any audience about. I had a vision at one point and the vision had to do with a dialogue that I was having with my father. And you know, you have a father, right? And when you're a little kid, you act out your father when you pretend to be a father. And what you're doing when you're acting out your father isn't imitating your father, because you don't duplicate precisely the actions that your father ever took in his life. What you do is you watch your father across multiple contexts, and you abstract out something like a spirit of the father. And then when you're a child, you implement that spirit of the father in your pretend play, and you come to embody that deeply. So the notion is that people can abstract out something like a spirit of the father. And that's part of our mimetic tendency, which is a very powerful human cognitive tendency. And in this vision, I first started to talk with my father, and I would say more with the spirit of my father, because he wasn't actually there. And I would say it was the wisest part of him. And then that sort of transformed into a discussion that I had with a series of ancestral spirits. And then that transformed itself into a vision of God himself, with whom I had a conversation. And this was a visionary experience. And then that all went away, and I spent months and months thinking about it. And I thought, so you guys can tell me what you think about this. And this sort of stretches my cognitive ability to its utmost limit to contemplate such things. But here's a biological argument. I already made the case that a child can extract out the spirit of the father and embody it, and that's necessary insofar as you're going to be a father and a wise one. But we can also extract out the spirit of the father over much longer periods of time, because my father was a father because he imitated his father, who imitated his father, who imitated his father, as far back in time as you can go. And there's a cumulative development of the spirit of the father across time. Now then the question might be, does this spirit of the father have any reality other than the metaphorical? And I would say, damn right it has a reality, and I can describe a biological reality, and I don't know what this says about any background metaphysics, but here's a hypothesis. We know that human beings separated from chimpanzees over the course of the last 7 million years, at least in large part because of human female sexual selectivity. So it was the spirit of femininity collectively that helped elevate us to the degree that we have been elevated above our chimpanzee co-ancestor. But here's something interesting to contemplate. What is it precisely that makes men desirable to women? And so I have a bit of a hypothesis about that. So here's what men do. They get together in productive groups, and they orient themselves toward a certain task. And they produce a hierarchy around that task, because whenever you implement a task, you produce a hierarchy. And they vote up the most competent men to the top of the hierarchy, and then the women select the competent men from the top of the hierarchy. But the vote that determines who the competent men are that are more likely to reproduce is a consequence of male evaluation of men, and that's occurred over millennia. And so there's a spirit of the father that's embedded in the patriarchal hierarchy that acts as the primary selection mechanism that offers men up to women and plays a cardinal role in human evolution. And it looks like we've personified that spirit of the father in our religious imagery. And that's how it looks to me. But then there's something that's even more mysterious and deep about that that's worth considering, is that Apparently, the entire course of evolutionary history has conspired to produce human beings, and we could argue that it could have been different, but it certainly hasn't been different. And that means that that selective spirit of the Father has been part of the process that's generated our very being, and it's certainly possible that that collective spirit of the Father reflects something metaphysically fundamental about the structure of reality itself.
Wait, I was
Do you
with
want to
you up
take a
until the
bite of
last
that?
sentence, yes. Well, insofar as I agree with virtually all of that, I should say that none of that should give comfort to people who want to hold on to this notion that certain of our books might have been revealed by the creator of the universe. Right?
Well, it depends on what you mean by the creator.